We are seeing, in terms of this paradigm shift, we are seeing a shift. We're seeing it in the mental health fields, beginning in the 1970s and 80s, a consumer survivor movement within mental health, a drive for recovery-oriented systems of care within the mental health arenas. We're now seeing that at the highest levels within the addictions arena. We're seeing CSAT pursuing recovery conferences and supporting all of our monographs on recovery-oriented systems of care. We have a night in NIAAA beginning to talk about the need to develop a recovery-focused research agenda. Are you with me? So we're seeing evidence of this shift that's coming. We're seeing calls for, we're seeing sort of a whole new language emerging. And if you haven't been part of that process, it sort of bumps into you and you think, what is that? My goal here in this first introductory module to really get us set for the details this afternoon of how is clinical practice going to change in this new world. I want to begin by talking about how this shift in paradigm is beginning to influence. These are 3 new resources we have, and I'm going to just step back and give you a little bit of something else that's impacting this drive towards recovery-oriented systems of care. And it really is science. When I came into the field in the late 1960s, I worked in the field in the early 1970s. Let me tell you one of my assumptions. My assumptions was that alcohol and drug problems, as I was seeing them in my residential treatment program and outpatient programs in those years, were the same problems existed in the community. It's just the ones out there hadn't got to me yet. Are you with me? So I was saying, alcohol and drug problems in clinical populations are the same as in community populations. They just haven't got bad enough to get to me yet. So I assumed anything I learn about alcohol and drug problems and addiction working with my clinical populations is applicable to people out there in that other world. What I need to tell you, I was absolutely wrong. You everybody hear me? Absolutely wrong. Because most of us in those years operated on what might be called a single pathway model of addiction treatment and recovery. We said there's a single ideological agent for this thing we call alcoholism or chemical dependency. We call it an X factor. We don't know what it is, but we're about to discover it any second. And we said that every year for about 50 years. And if you got this bug, this is what it looks like. And if you look like this, you need to come into treatment that looks like this. And then you need to go out of the treatment, and this is how you need to live the rest of your life. One way in, one way out. Here's what the science began to tell us. There are multiple pathways into significant and severe alcohol and other drug problems. Everybody hear me? Multiple etiological pathways. Number 2, those pathways unfold in some very different patterns. Patterns by way of how they first present, patterns in terms of whether they're acute or chronic, and in fact, under patterns, here's the big story. Alcohol and other drug problems present in transient and chronic forms. Everybody hear me? Transient, meaning that the onset, peak severity, and cessation of that problem occurs within a very short time span, generally 18 to 24 months. Let me give you an example. If I studied 1,000 couples going through a divorce event, what do you think happens to psychoactive drug consumption in the 24 months surrounding that event? Every psychoactive drug. What do you think happens to nicotine use, alcohol use, prescription drug use, illicit drug use? Goes up. Now here's the good news. The good news is if I come back 5 years later, I'm going to find some of those people are going to get in trouble, right? Didn't have a problem before the divorce, got into this 24-month window of vulnerability, got themselves in trouble. But if I take those who are in trouble in that window and I come back 5 years later, most of them are not in trouble. Meaning what? Including some of you in this room. Come on, be with me. All right, come on, right? Let's get real here for a minute. Because they got through it. They were wounded. They bled. They were pained. They found ways to get themselves supported. They healed, and as they healed, they began to shed those problems. If I come to the colleges and university in Georgia, how many students will meet DSM-4 criteria for abuse of alcohol? Right now, today. But let's be clear. It's pretty substantial and scary if you look at those numbers. They meet, I'm not talking about they binge, I'm not talking about binge drinking. I'm talking about they meet diagnostic criteria for a substance use disorder. Now, here's the good news. Most of them, what's going to happen when I take them out of the college environment? They're going to maintain that environmentally supported pattern of alcohol and drug use. But when I shift the environment, and they get families and jobs that are incongruent with that, they shed them. We call this maturing out or spontaneous remission or other such things. Here's the key. The vast majority of people with alcohol and other drug problems will solve those problems without professional treatment or participation in recovery mutual aid groups. And we should celebrate that and find ways to speed that process up. Here's the punchline for today. Some of these pathways don't do that.